Hello, my name's Duncan Light from Bournemouth University, and welcome to the first in this series of Dracula Lunchtime Bites. These are a series of public-facing lectures where specialists in Dracula and the Gothic will give online talks about their research while you're eating your lunch. Now, this isn't the actual recording because I forgot to press record when the actual talk was on, so I'm recording this again at a later date. So these lunchtime bites are part of the Dracula Returns to Derby project, which is funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council and which is based at the University of Derby and led by Professor Matthew Cheeseman. It's a project which aims to highlight and celebrate Derby's connection with Dracula. And Dracula has a lot more connections with Derby than you may at first realise. It was in Derby that the first theatrical production of Dracula was given in 1924. And this introduced us to the image of Dracula that we all know today, the suave, aristocratic lounge lizard in evening dress and opera cape. And then Bela Lugosi, the actor who first played Dracula in film in 1931, the Universal Studios production, himself came to Derby on several occasions in 1953 to perform the stage play there. So Derby has a lot more connections with Dracula than you may realise. You can find out more at the project website, and you can follow us on social media on Facebook and Instagram. So this talk was originally timed for Halloween, and so I'm going to kick off this series of Dracula Lunchtime Bites with a talk called Halloween in Transylvania, Excitement and Disappointment. Transylvania is a real place, although a lot of people don't realise that. So where exactly is it? Well, Transylvania is in Romania. This is a map of Europe showing the location of Romania. And this is a close-up of Romania, and Transylvania is this area here within the arc of the Carpathian Mountains. Now, Transylvania was virtually unknown in the West until a writer called Emily Gerard published a book called The Land Beyond the Forest in 1885. She was from Scotland. She was married to an officer in the Austro-Hungarian army, was based in Transylvania for 2 years, and enthusiastically set out collecting local folklore. So this is quite a famous quotation from her book. Transylvania might well be called the land of superstition, for nowhere else does this crooked plant of delusion flourish as persistently and in such bewildering variety. It would almost seem as though the whole species of demons, pixies, witches, and hobgoblins, driven from the rest of Europe by the wand of science, had taken refuge within this mountain rampart. Now, this book wasn't widely read in Britain, but one person who did read it was Bram Stoker, and he used some of the information in his famous novel Dracula, first published in 1897. Stoker portrayed Transylvania as a dark and sinister place, a suitable home for a sinister predatory vampire. So here are some of the quotes from the novel and what he said about Transylvania. Jonathan Harker writes as he leaves Budapest, "The impression I have was that we were leaving the West and entering the East." He later writes, "The Carpathian Mountains, one of the wildest and least known portions of Europe." And he goes on, "I read that every known superstition in the world is gathered into the horseshoe of the Carpathians as if it were the centre of some sort of imaginative whirlpool." Later, he's in Bistrica, and the innkeeper tells him, "It is the eve of St. George's Day. Do you not know that tonight, when the clock strikes midnight, all the evil things in the world will have full sway?" And later, Count Dracula himself says, "We are in Transylvania, and Transylvania is not England. Our ways are not your ways, and there shall be to you many strange things." Even the Transylvanian landscape is evoked as somehow sinister. So Van Helsing says, "The very place where he, Dracula, have been alive undead for all these centuries is full of strangeness of the geologic and chemical world. There are deep caverns and fissures that reach none know whither. There have been volcanoes, some of whom openings still send out waters of strange properties and gases that kill. There is something magnetic or electric in some of these combinations of occult forces." Now, Bram Stoker had never been to Transylvania. He'd never been anywhere close to it. All he'd done is read books about it. So this portrayal of Transylvania was almost entirely the work of his imagination. And crucially, Stoker wasn't so much describing Transylvania as it exists. Instead, he was inventing it. He was inventing this idea of Transylvania as a dark, sinister place where vampires have full reign. Now, he created what we geographers call a place myth. A place myth is a collection of ideas, mental pictures, stereotypes about what a place is like, which over time can become established in the collective consciousness. But the key point about a place myth is that it's founded on received knowledge, not on first-hand experience of actually having been to that place. And some places develop very powerful place myths. We feel that we know something about them, even if we haven't been there ourselves. For example, Paris has the place myth of the city of love. New York has the place myth of the city that never sleeps. Las Vegas has the place myth of Sin City. And Transylvania has developed one of the most powerful place myths, a place on the edge of Europe, remote, backwards, sinister, scary, where vampires and other supernatural creatures run wild. It's a place which represents danger and a threat. Now, if Dracula had enjoyed the same popularity as Bram Stoker's other 11 novels, the chances are that nobody would have heard of Transylvania today. But Dracula has enjoyed huge popularity after it was published. The novel has never been out of print, it's been translated into numerous foreign languages, and cinema quickly discovered Dracula. There have been over 200 films featuring Count Dracula. The most famous early version was the 1931 Universal version, featuring Bela Lugosi in the role of Dracula. He performed the role 11 times in Derby on stage in the 1950s. Then Christopher Lee took over the role in the 1950s and 1960s with the Hammer Studios productions. And more recently, Gary Oldman, perhaps in my mind the best Dracula ever, took over the role in Bram Stoker's Dracula in 1993. So through cinema, this place myth of Transylvania as somewhere sinister and dangerous has circulated globally. Transylvania has become a kind of generic home for every type of monster and supernatural creature known. As the film historian, the late David Scull, observed, in the past century, Transylvania has become a pop culture dumping ground for just about every monster under the sun. And over time, this Transylvania place myth has circulated globally and taken on a life of its own. And it is stoked up and given a new burst of life on a regular basis. So here are just a few examples. This is a book called A Night in Transylvania, which came out in the 1970s. What other land calls up such mystical visions of shroudy misted forests, of driverless coaches pounding up treacherous uncharted trails to hidden castles, of black-cloaked figures stalking across moonlit cemeteries in the chill of night? And here's another book that came out in the 1980s, The Tourist's Guide to Transylvania. And it says, the newcomer to Transylvania will find himself in a world of overwhelming mystery and alien phenomena. The towns and hamlets, though themselves steeped in a tradition of occult participation, offer the visitors some semblance of normality and the opportunity to acclimatise to the darker realities that exist here. And we even see this place myth of Transylvania in tourist brochures. For example, this one. Transylvania, the very word, conjures up romantic images of a mysterious land where myths and legends are closely woven into the fabric of everyday life. So such is the power of the place myth of Transylvania as a dark, haunted, sinister place that it's become absolutely an ideal place to spend Halloween. What better place than somewhere that is known globally as the home of vampires and other supernatural creatures? So I wanted to look in more detail at the association between Transylvania and Halloween. So I accompanied a group of 22 tourists who had come to Romania on a themed package to spend Halloween in Transylvania, and I spent some time talking to them about their expectations and experiences of Transylvania. They were a very diverse group. Some had a genuine belief in the supernatural. As one couple told me, we're in touch with our dark side. But others just liked the fun and the spookiness associated with Halloween, and others just wanted to try an unusual holiday. But it was clear from talking to these tourists that Halloween was a special time for them. For example, one person said, Halloween's my favourite holiday in the world. I love dressing up. I love costume. I love acting out. Halloween's the kind of time when you can just have fun and let all the stops out and, be as nuts as you want to. The Halloween party, to dress up and leave reality behind for an evening. It's not often you can relax and do something quite mad without any inhibitions or restrictions. On top of that, Transylvania had a unique status as a place to spend Halloween. It was the ultimate place to spend Halloween. As one person told me, Transylvania is the core of Halloween for us. This is an ideal Halloween trip. This one beats all the previous ones to actually be in Transylvania on Halloween. So we followed this route. We started off in the capital, Bucharest. We spent a few days there, and then we headed north into the Carpathian Mountains, stopping off at Sibiu, Sigishwara, and we ended up in the Borgo Pass at Hotel Castle Dracula, high in the Carpathian Mountains. So before we arrived in Transylvania, I asked these tourists what they expected Transylvania to be like. And these were the sort of things they said. Mountainous, small villages, fairy tale castles, forests, misty, rural, dark, superstitious people, medieval building, bleak, eerie, mysterious wolves and graveyards. Now, this is everything you'd expect. It's shaped by the Transylvania place myth as it's circulated through film and popular culture. So, as I said, we spent a couple of days in Bucharest and then we headed north to Transylvania, and the excitement was palpable. Transylvania was eagerly anticipated. So as we were driving north into the Carpathians, people were saying to me, "Are we in Transylvania yet? Can you tell us when we cross the border? Can you tell us when we're in Transylvania?" And then when we actually crossed the county border into Transylvania, the excitement intensified. So our first stop in Transylvania was the city of Sibiu, and the group scattered far and wide in search of Transylvania souvenirs. What they wanted was anything with the word Transylvania on it. And they came back disappointed because Transylvania isn't a Romanian word. Romanians call the region Ardeal and rarely use Transylvania. So as a result, there wasn't much to be found in Sibiu which had the word Transylvania on it. Now, after a couple of days in Transylvania, we arrived in the Borgo Pass in order to spend Halloween at this place, Hotel Castle Dracula, high in the Carpathian Mountains. It's a hotel built in the approximate location of where Castle Dracula is in Bram Stoker's novel Dracula. Now, it doesn't look that much like a castle, but you have to think about the context in which it was built. It was built in the 1980s during the communist period, when state policy was about discouraging any association between Romania and Dracula. And it was built sort of under the counter by a local tourist official who was aware that people were coming to the Borgo Pass in search of Castle Dracula. And he wanted to provide something for them to meet their needs, but he had to tone down the spookiness of it to conform to state policy. But the point is, it's a hotel, it resembles a castle, it's in Transylvania, it's in the Carpathian Mountains, and it's in the approximate location of Castle Dracula in the novel. So the group checked in and then enthusiastically set off to explore the hotel. And although they were a bit disappointed with the building, they weren't going to let that spoil Halloween for them. So they spent the evening of Halloween doing all sorts of things where they acted out the Transylvania place myth. They gave full rein to their imagination and allowed themselves to enter into the imaginative world of Dracula. Some said that they hoped to be scared. So when I asked one woman about this, she said, "Oh, I hope so." And her husband was an engineer and described himself as a rationalist. But he said that, "I don't believe in the supernatural, but I can enjoy it and I can get a thrill out of pretending that it exists. So I'm also looking forward to being scared." Others went outside looking for bats. Now, it was late October, an altitude of 1,100 meters, so there weren't any bats around. Others went outside to listen to wolves howling, and some people said that they'd heard wolves. There are plenty of wolves in the Carpathians. Everybody expected Count Dracula to make an appearance. This was something that was eagerly anticipated. Now, in fact, the Count never showed up on Halloween night, but that just added to the excitement and this sense of anticipation. One woman told me that she was going to go to her hotel room at midnight and leave a full glass of wine at the open window as a gift for Count Dracula. There was a graveyard near the castle, so plenty of these tourists took the opportunity to wander around the graveyard, particularly at midnight. And there was a coffin in the cellar of the building, specifically put there for Dracula fans. And so loads of them took the opportunity to lay down in it and close the lid. And of course, everybody dressed up for Halloween as Dracula, Countess Dracula, vampires, monsters, and everything. Extravagant costumes, and everybody took a lot of care over their costumes. So what we were seeing here was adults at play. They were giving full rein to their imagination and really acting out the Transylvania place myth. When they were in Transylvania for Halloween, they were entering into the imaginative world of Dracula. Now, we usually think of play as something that's associated with children, but it's clear that adults play too. And this was a form of play based on Transylvania as they imagined it to be. Now, after Halloween, as we were traveling back to Bucharest, I asked them about whether Transylvania had lived up to their expectations. And the most common response was no. They all felt Transylvania was great. They'd all enjoyed spending Halloween there, but it didn't match the expectations they'd had of it before their visit. In fact, the most common response was disappointment. They had all these expectations generated by the Transylvania placemat, and then Transylvania hadn't quite matched these expectations. It wasn't the dark and scary and sinister place that they'd been anticipating. So, for example, one person said, I suppose in some ways we're expecting it to be more authentic. I expected it to be probably more craggy. I expected to see perhaps more of those turrety castles. Somebody else said, I imagined it probably slightly less green and more like barren and mountainous, more forested rather than open green spaces. And somebody else said, I guess I expected the mountains to be a little more, I don't know, mountainous, a little more snow than what I'm used to for mountains. Now, in fact, disappointment is a common part of the tourist experience where the destination doesn't match what you expect it to be. So why were these tourists disappointed with Transylvania? Well, Transylvania in reality is stunningly beautiful, but it isn't anything like the Transylvania placemat. For example, this is Transylvania. Apart from the mountains which are at the edge of the region, it's mostly low rolling hills. That's Transylvania, absolutely stunningly beautiful landscapes. That's Transylvania. That's Transylvania. You can see the Carpathians in the background. And that's Transylvania right on the edge with the Carpathian Mountains. So as you can see, it's not particularly dark or sinister or spooky or scary. And there's not a vampire in sight. So what this tells us is just how powerful a placemat can be. It can create ideas about what a place is like that bear no relation to reality. And Bram Stoker's portrayal of Transylvania is just one example of this. And placemats can make people do things, in this case, travel to Transylvania to spend Halloween there, based on the expectation that it was somewhere dark and haunted and sinister. But such experiences can lead to disappointment if the place as experienced doesn't live up to the expectations generated by the placemat. But in this case, these tourists overcame their disappointment by giving full rein to their imagination. They acted out the Transylvania placemat in all sorts of ways to turn Transylvania into what they wanted it to be, somewhere dark, sinister and haunted. And that for them made it the perfect place to spend Halloween. Thanks very much for listening. And if you're interested about any of the others in the Dracula Lunchtime Bites series, you can find details and book at this web link. Thanks for watching.